In celebration of the U.S. Constitution and citizenship, Middlesex hosts programs and events each year, from civic engagement initiatives to debates on hot topics and to get the vote out on campaigns. This week in September is filled with festivities honoring both our nation's history and current events. This morning's keynote speaker continues Middlesex Community College's tradition of programming that offers students insight to their role in active, engaged citizens. We are fortunate that on the 226th anniversary of the signing of the U.S. Constitution, we have the opportunity to celebrate with a presentation by Boston Police Commissioner Edward Davis. I would like to now invite Middlesex esteemed President, Dr. Carol Cowan, to the podium to introduce our special guest.
Well, good morning to all of you, to our special guests, to our Lowell residents who have joined us here today, friends of Ed Davis from years past, and especially to our students in our criminal justice programs. We welcome you to this very special presentation. As Dawn said, every year the college celebrates the U.S. Constitution with special events or special speakers, and this year is no exception. We're very proud to have a friend, an old dear friend of Middlesex Community College. I don't mean old that way, Ed. I mean you've been with us a long time. Dear friend of Middlesex Community College, Commissioner Ed Davis of Boston. We've worked with Commissioner Davis over several years. When he was the chief of police here in Lowell, he was a constant partner with us in many activities that really promoted the health and welfare of the citizens of Lowell, but also the students and staff of Middlesex Community College. Whenever there was a crisis in the community or a crisis at the college, we could always reach out to Ed Davis as chief here in Lowell, and he would quickly drive to the college, drive to our offices, brief us on protocols and what we should be thinking about. So we considered him part of the college community and have. When he announced that he was going off to Boston, our hearts sunk a little bit because we said, gee, we're going to lose Ed Davis. But look what's happened to him since. He's moved into Boston, took over the Boston Police Department, a challenge I don't think any one of us in this room would welcome. And then, lo and behold, the events of last April take hold. And we see Ed Davis front and center, leading after a terrorist attack. So we're grateful that we have Ed Davis here today to talk about the Boston bombings, but also to talk about the impact of the Constitution on that kind of an investigation. Ed was a leader in community policing in Lowell, also around the nation, and really around the world. So it's my privilege to welcome him here this morning, a good friend of Middlesex Community College, Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis.
Thank you, Carol, and good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. While we're thanking people, I'd like to thank your president. Carol Cowan played a vital role in the aftermath of the marathon, in that she allowed Patrick Cook, who was one of my former team members here in the Lowell Police Department, to come down to Boston and to help me deal with the incredible things that happened in the weeks and months following the attack. I had to go to testify before Senate and House subcommittees. I had to get a lot of information out that was really crisis management information, and Pat has a great background in that and played a vital role. He was able to come down for several weeks and assist us in dealing with the aftermath. I had a conversation just a few days after the marathon with an old friend of mine who was a police chief in Aurora and Colorado. And he said to me, Eddie, the month after the attack is going to be busier than the week that you spent dealing with the attack. And he was absolutely right. The amount of demands on the police department, on my time, on the time of the other police chiefs, and the colonel of the state police and the special agent in charge of the FBI. All of that has been dramatic and has affected the way we do our jobs. And we've needed help to get it done. So I want to thank Patrick publicly for all that he did to help me with that. I appreciate it. There's some old friends in the room. For some reason, they all sat in the front row. But cops tend to congregate with each other. I think they're nervous. But I want to recognize a few people here. First of all, Kelly Richardson, captain in the police department. Kelly and I came on the job almost the same time. He was working in the radio room. I was out in a patrol car. And we spent a lot of good time together and done a lot of good work together. And he's doing a great job here in the city. Next to him is the Deputy Superintendent Arthur Ryan. Arthur, again, is a lifelong friend of mine. His dad and I worked together 100 years ago, and tremendous family, just like mine. Families, tend to proliferate in the police department. Once you get in, you can't get out. It's like a mafia. But the truth of the matter is, Arthur and his dad have done an incredible job of service here to the community, and I appreciate him coming down here today, especially in light of the fact that there's so much going on back at the office. Jackie Cook, my old friend, Patrick's wife, and an employee still at the Lowell Police Department. She worked for me when I was there. She's a remarkable person. Thank you for coming down, Jackie. And then Chucky Willett, who I met when I was about 14 years old. Chucky's dad and my dad were both cops together in Lowell, and we've been friends ever since. And there's a whole bunch of other people. I see Terry Downs out there, and I mean, guys that I've worked with. I'm going to talk about Terry a little later. My nephew Joey Davis is here, my brother's son, and his girlfriend who's a student here. So, okay, I guess I wasn't talking loud enough. Are you going to stay here? It's all right if you want to. But no, I'm just teasing. You can do whatever you want, obviously. So I wanted to recognize them and wish you best of luck in your studies. I also haven't had my coffee yet this morning, and after running up 128, I think I'm going to sip on this, if you don't mind, so my apologies to everybody. So we want to talk today about the Constitution. And that's a tremendous topic, because the Constitution plays an enormous role in everything that police officers do. We train on it extensively in the police academy. 22 weeks of training all around the criminal laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But the truth of the matter is, much of it is training that's based upon the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, so that people understand, police officers who have to exercise their duties, understand the importance of the Constitution and how that plays a role in what we do day in and day out. And I will tell you that in the early morning hours of Friday, just after the marathon, when we were in Watertown and we were chasing these terrorists down, the Constitution and questions around the Constitution played an important role in the decisions that we were making. And I hope to give you some insight on that. I have to be cautious because I can't tell you everything that we knew at that time. There's an ongoing federal investigation. There are 4 prosecutions that are pending in the United States District Court for Massachusetts, and so some of the information that we had is still confidential. But I can tell you, not exactly what we reported to the governor and the mayor, but I can tell you a little bit about how serious we thought that was. And so I'll do the best that I can to skirt the confidential stuff, but at least to tell you what the constitutional issues were that we were dealing with here. So bear with me as we go through this. I'll speak a little bit about the marathon, about what brought us to that to the decisions that were so important around the Constitution, and then mostly I'd like to take questions from people here. So I've been asked to talk for 20 or 30 minutes, and then open it up so that we can have a good dialogue, and I can try to do my best to answer as many questions as I can. April 15th is an important day in the city of Boston. It's Patriots Day. This year, the race was the 117th running of the Boston Marathon. So this is an ancient and venerable tradition in the city of Boston, and it's really, really important to the city, to runners, athletes who come in from all over the world. But it's also important to the Commonwealth because it celebrates a day in our history that was so important to the founding of America, Patriots Day. It celebrates all that happened at Lexington and Concord, and how that led to a free democracy and a constitutional democracy, a democracy that is not just based upon what everybody wants to do, but based on certain tenets that we all adhere to. And so that's what's so important about this document. It's a living, breathing document. It lives every time a police officer makes a stop. It lives every time we make a plan to raid a house or to execute a search warrant or an arrest warrant. It's something that in the police world and in the legal world we talk about all the time. The marathon course, as you all know, runs from Hopkinton, Massachusetts into downtown Boston. It's 26.2 miles long. And there are many people in this room that have run it. And I also found out after the bombings that whether you've run the marathon or whether you had a friend that was there that day or whether you shopped on Boylston Street or whether you had a relative or you yourself went to school in the city of Boston and happened to walk back and forth, when this assault happened, it was a very personal assault for people around the world. I get calls from police officials literally around the world. And every one of them said something to the effect of, my God, my daughter goes to Northeastern, I was just on Boylston Street. It was really remarkable, the personal assault that this turned into for people. But as you can imagine, in a high-profile event like this, since 9/11, police have spent a lot of time planning to make sure that nothing bad happens. And even though it was over 10 years from the 9/11 attacks, our planning had not changed. Our commitment to security had not changed. If anything, we've been ramping it up over the last several years because of the various threat streams that we receive from the federal government. We have a fusion center, one of 70 national fusion centers located in the city of Boston. It's run by the Boston Police Department. There's a second one that's run in Acton by the state police, but the one in Boston deals with Boston and the metropolitan area. All of the contiguous communities around Boston, we all get together and share information. And we have people working on intelligence, and we are tied into all the federal, state, and other local intelligence operations, and we share information, not only on terrorist information, but also on intelligence that relates to ongoing criminal activity. And so the BRIC, we call it the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, or BRIC. The BRIC plays a very important role in the preparation for this event. It's an international event. If you get down to the finish line, and many of you have been there, there's actually a bridge constructed above the finish line. And that bridge is loaded with media, both print and video and still photographs, media from all over the world. They come to cover their runners. So there's European, Asian, African press. We literally have media from all over the world that are on top of that bridge and taking pictures of the runners as they come in, especially the elite runners. So when you study terrorism, and you know that terrorists are interested in more than just killing people, but they're interested in getting their message out, and you look at that finish line, and I sit there every year, I've sat at that finish line every year, 7 years, you recognize that this is a possible terrorist target. Now, all that stuff is in the background. We do our jobs every day when we prepare for every event in the city. We prepare for First Night, we prepare for 4th of July, we prepare for sports events, we prepare for the Boston Marathon. The same process is followed. We bring in the FBI, we bring in all of the intelligence agencies' stream of information, and we sit down and we talk about what threats there are to this event. And that happened in this particular case. There were no, and the terminology is always the same. There is no specific threat to the Boston Marathon. That's what we got from everybody. That's what we believed ourselves. And that was true in the days leading up to the Boston Marathon. However, there were two lone wolves, two people that were operating in a small town, actually not a small town, in Cambridge actually, just north of us, who had their own plans, who hadn't talked to anybody else, who were not dealing with international terrorist groups that we monitor, but were hatching a plan that would turn the city on its head. And despite all of our preparations, they were able to sneak in. And we'll talk a little bit about how they did that. We had 854 police officers assigned to the 2.5 miles that the route runs through Boston. It comes into the city out by the colleges, BU and BC, it comes down in through Kenmore Square, and then takes a hard right and up onto Boylston Street. And those 850 police officers were assigned in that short area, with the bulk of them being assigned at the finish line. We did undercover operations inside the crowds at the finish line. We had plainclothes officers that were working the crowd looking for suspicious activity like a terrorist, but also for simple things like pickpockets that we have a problem with at the finish line. They were out there working. I actually talked to them that morning. At 7 o'clock in the morning, our protocol, much like with a presidential event, is to send bomb-sniffing dogs into the race course. So they start up by Hereford Street and they go down Boylston Street from all those blocks on both sides of the street. On the right-hand side of the street, as you approach the finish line, there's a VIP area. That VIP area is locked down about 4 o'clock in the morning. It's searched by bomb dogs, and then police are stationed there to keep it secure. Anybody in my business knows that you can search a place with a dog, a bomb-sniffing dog. You can bring in equipment to try to find out if there are bombs in that area. But if you don't keep security on that particular location, you've lost your ability to say that location is secure. And so it's fine when you're locking down a 3-block area that you've set aside for the governor and the mayor and some high-ranking people for sponsors of this event. But in a course that's 26.2 miles long, you cannot lock it down. There are not enough police officers in Massachusetts to lock down 26.2 miles of the race course. So this is inherently what we call in our business a soft target. There's going to be groups of people that are standing there that have not been searched. There's going to be groups of people that are waiting in line to be searched that have not been checked out for weapons or for explosive devices. And so when we go to these events, we have to keep that in mind, just as a member of the public. At 14:48 hours, at just about 10 minutes of 3 on Monday afternoon, I was in my home in Hyde Park. I had been at the race. The race had finished. I should say the elite runners had finished. And some of the fastest runners had come across already. I hung around for a little while, and I had to take a conference call. The conference call was with several major city police chiefs and the vice president. And I thought it would be, since it was a holiday, I thought since the dangerous part of the race had passed. Now remember, we talked about the press. And the press who were there at the finish line all start to leave after the elite runners come across. So with the exit of the international press, in our minds, the threat diminishes. If you're smart and you're a terrorist, you want to do it when there's the most media coverage, and when the media coverage goes away, it becomes less of a threat. I took the phone call. The phone call was ending. I hung up. The phone rang immediately. And something happened here. At that point in time, my chief of department, Dan Linsky, who was in charge of the operation, was in Kenmore Square. And he got me on the phone, and he said, Commissioner, we have a report of an explosion at the finish line. So we had just had an explosion on one of the side streets near the finish line of a big, huge transformer that N-Star owned. And I thought it was that. And I said, is it electrical? And he said, it doesn't sound like it. They're saying there's 2 explosions. When he said there were 2 explosions, I started to go out to the car. I said, tell me more. So as I'm going down the stairs and out the door, my wife is down on the first floor, and she said something happened at the marathon. She's got the TV on. So I went out. I just went out the door without talking to her. Got in the car, and Danny said, we got 2 explosions. They went off in close proximity to each other, near the finish line. One's at Ring Road, which we're intimately familiar with, and one is right at the finish line. Danny Keeler, one of our exceptional sergeants, a guy that worked in homicide, has been involved in big investigations his whole life. Danny Keeler was reporting that there were multiple injuries, multiple amputations, and that we needed every ambulance that we could get. And the other thing he said was Danny was unintelligible on the radio, which is an indication that something really bad is going on. When you got a guy as experienced as Danny Keeler that is yelling on the radio, that's a really bad sign for us. So I start heading in very quickly. And Danny tells me that the amputations are multiple. So that only means one thing to me, that this is a low-placed improvised explosive device. And we've got a serious problem. It's our worst nightmare. So I said to Danny said to me that he is heading to the scene, and he will call me when he gets there. Danny Keeler, who is pictured in this, right in the foreground of this picture, is a sergeant. He played a really important role because he made sure all the roads were kept open for the ambulances. In Aurora, when they first arrived at the theater, all the cruisers came in and blocked the roads so the ambulances couldn't get into them. And it's a huge problem in our business. Policemen don't care where they park. I often said that fire hydrants were put out there so police would have a place to park when we were working. You know what I mean? I thank the firefighters for that. But the truth of the matter is, everybody's trying to get to the scene, and they don't think about the other people that are responding. So Danny played an important role in keeping the roads clear. We didn't have the Aurora problem because of his taking charge and making such a difference. The second bomb goes off here, Boylston and Ring Road. You can see it. It's caught on video and still photos. Both of these officers, the other officers from District 4, tremendous kid. I talked to him for 90 minutes the night of the bombing. He was very upset about what happened. If you look at his hands, he's got gloves on, the second officer there. He had just put those gloves on. It was kind of a chilly day. And he ran over to where that bomb went off, like directly into it. And he found a guy that was on fire. And he used his gloves to pat the fire out. So it was a remarkable assistance that he provided to this guy that really saved his life. These guys are real heroes. So these 2 bombs go off. As I'm heading in, I call immediately for help, even before I call the mayor. I get on the phone with Rick Delorier, who is the special agent in charge of the Boston office of the FBI. Rick and I are friends. We have each other's cell phones. We work together on a bunch of different cases over this 7 years that I've been there in Boston. And his predecessors, we had very close relationships. So I said to Rick, listen, Rick, we got 2 explosions at the finish line. I'm not sure what it is, but I don't like it. I need all of your SWAT and EOD assets. That was the sum total of the conversation. He said, I'm on the way. Now, what that means to people who don't understand those acronyms is that in preparation for the event, we have people on standby. And there are 2 major groups in the Commonwealth, right actually in the Boston area, that have significant SWAT, special weapons and tactics, and EOD, which is explosive ordnance disposal, or bomb squads, okay? So there are 2 groups that have those squads right in the city. And one of them is the FBI, and the other is the state police. So I called Rick Delorier from the FBI, And then I called Tim Albans from the state police. And I said, I need all of your SWAT and EOD assets right away at Ring Road. Ring Road is literally on the right-hand side by this explosion. But it's also a staging area for us that we've used before. It's a kind of a dead-end street that's wide open. And so both of these guys basically said, on the way. There were no questions, there were no concerns. They understood the gravity of this, so they sent everything that they had. And that was really important at that point in time. That was within 2 or 3 minutes of the bombs going off. Why was that important? It's important because I've done an extensive amount of work in the Middle East. I've been trained by all of the federal agencies, CIA, NSA, FBI, about what this threat is about. We've all been given secret and top secret clearances in the police department. We work with the FBI and the Joint Terrorism Task Force. There's a very good system that's been put together after 9/11 so that we understand what the threat is and we can respond to it. One thing that we know about Al-Qaeda is that they strike in threes. There are frequently 3 explosions or 2 explosions and a rifle assault when they do something. And so we're worried. Just within a couple of minutes of the incident, we're worried, where are they going to hit? Where's the third assault going to occur? So we need people to be able to start to cover not only the race, not only the evacuation of the patients and the people, but we need bomb squads in there to see if there's a third explosive device that didn't go off. And then we need SWAT teams available to start to protect what we call our critical infrastructure in the city. And we spent a lot of time in the last 10 years determining what critical infrastructure is, what the most likely targets for a terrorist attack would be, and quantifying that, and then making sure that if something really bad happens, that we can start to protect those critical infrastructure places very quickly. And so all of that planning and all of that preparation that we've done over the years, and we've gamed this out on tabletops, we've actually done full-scale exercises all over the city, and we know what we have to do when something like this happens. We plan for the worst and we hope for the best. Tragically, on April 15th, the worst happened. When I get to the scene, there were 2 bodies here. Lindsay Lee, her name is spelled L-U, but they tell me it's pronounced Lee, so people have criticized me for that before, but I want you to know I think I'm doing what her real name is, Lindsay Lee. As well as Martin Richard. Martin was 8 years old. Lindsay was a 30-year-old graduate student. Martin was 8. He was there with his parents. His sister Jane lost her left leg in the attack. Their dad picked them both up. Martin was dying, and we watched over and over again as the dad tried to take care of them. Really tough stuff. There was a significant volume of blood there, as you can imagine. There were body parts at the scene. There were a lot of shrapnel. As you walked into the scene, you walked on shrapnel. Now, why is that important? It's important because we know when we get to a scene and we find shrapnel that this is an anti-personnel device that went off. We can't reconstruct the bomb right there. We don't know exactly how it went off or how it was triggered. All of that stuff is very important, but takes a day or 2 to figure out. But when you find shrapnel on the ground, you know that someone devised a bomb to be as lethal as possible. They were trying to kill people. They put metal fragments inside that bomb to make sure that it would rip skin and flesh and kill people. So it really bothers me when I see some stuff on the internet where people are saying, oh, this poor confused kid. This little editorial comment, okay? If you knew the Richards family and you saw what happened to those 2 little kids, you may have a different perspective on this. Bomb went off. The damage at Ring Road was bad. The damage farther down was worse. Little bit of a heavier charge in the explosion. The blast damage actually went up 3 stories. Knocked windows out on 3 stories. The top of the pressure cooker we determined in a day, or later that day, The top of the pressure cooker was found on the 5th floor of that building. That's how powerful that bomb was. Crystal Campbell died at the finish line. She was a great kid. Actually, she waited on us. She worked at a restaurant out on the island. I had taken my staff out there the summer before, and Crystal was one of the waitresses, so we knew who she was. Tough stuff. Everybody was gone from the scene as far as spectators when I got there. It took me about 15 minutes to get back to the scene. But there were still patients being picked up. Some of them were amputees. Not all the most seriously injured patients ended up in an ambulance. The ambulances pulled in and picked up the people they saw first, but by the time the ambulances were heading out, all full, 2, 3, 4 patients in each ambulance, there were still people, seriously injured people, at the scene who didn't have ambulances to pick them up. So in a key decision, Dan Linsky, my chief of department, ordered the officers to put these patients into patrol wagons. And so they loaded up 2 patients, one on each side on the bench seats inside the patrol wagon, and they transported. Some with amputations. All of them had tourniquets on. Tourniquets played a very important role here, saved a lot of lives. Not one person that was transported from the scene died. They moved hundreds of people. Everybody that we got into an ambulance or a wagon that got to a hospital survived, and they survived because of the incredible first responder treatment. People were fashioning tourniquets out of shirts and ties and things that they got their hands on there to stem the bleeding. We all know the story of Jeff Bowman. He's a local resident. I've met Jeff and his brother. He would not be here if it wasn't for what Carlos did. There were doctors that were running on the route that stopped and helped. There were firemen, soldiers, policemen that were just visiting, that were there to watch, that did an incredible amount of work. And there were EMTs. I mean, everybody pulled together. There were also a substantial number of medical people at the medical tents. They all ran down the street. So it really was an incredible medical event that was handled very, very well. 8,000 runners, some in this room, were stopped by 2 police officers who walked out onto the course. It's funny, I had about a month after this incident happened, the ambassador from India came to visit, along with a contingent of police officials from Mumbai. In 2008, Mumbai suffered a terrible terrorist attack. And the police chief came and sat down and looked at some of the same information that you're looking at. And when he saw this photo, he said, "Tell me again what happened here." And I said, "Well, 2 police officers right outside of Kenmore Square walked out and stopped what amounted to about 8,000 runners." So he laughed and he said, "This would not happen in my country." And it's an interesting, that's an interesting theme, because people have respect for the law here, and that applies to almost everything that we do. So the investigation goes on. That sets the scene for what we're dealing with. Investigation goes on. We get the pictures of the suspects out, and there's a big debate as to whether or not we put the pictures out. And some of that debate was constitutional in nature. We don't know that these guys were the ones that did it. We have some very good video evidence, but if we put their picture out, will someone harm them? Should we keep the picture to ourselves and not engage the community in this search? And then the other side of the argument was, we have baseball games, we have hockey games, we have basketball games about to start. How do we not tell people that these 2 guys are out there? How do we not protect the community? That debate raged for a couple of days. On Thursday, around 5 o'clock, we released the photos. And then just after that, at about 10 o'clock that night, these 2 guys went active. They knew they were going to get caught. So they went out, and the first thing they did was they found a MIT police officer sitting in his cruiser. He just finished up a call. He was doing his report. They came up to the side of the cruiser and they shot him in the face 3 times. And that was to try to get his gun. Luckily, he had he had a retention holster that they couldn't figure out, so they didn't get the firearm off him. They spent some time there trying to do that, and then they ran away. As you can imagine, when we had the death of a police officer, we all started to mobilize again. I had about 200 cops that were heading into Cambridge over the course of the 2 hours from the time that Sean Collier was murdered until the time that the pursuit happened. But as you all know, the terrorists hijacked a car. Luckily, the victim of the hijacking managed to escape. Under threat of being shot, he ran away, saved his life. He was able to give us information that activated a GPS system in a car. And so the Cambridge police, now working on this case, but backed up by state police and Boston police and FBI agents who were all working, put out the call that the vehicle was in Watertown near the Arsenal Mall. Watertown is a community of 60,000 people. It has 60 cops. I'm sorry, it's 30,000 people, 60 cops. And there were 3 on duty that night. Cambridge calls Watertown and says, we got the car. It's near the intersection of Laurel and Dexter Street. And the Watertown police respond. They're ordered not to stop the car, but the suspects engage the officers when they see them. They never turn the lights on, they never try to stop the car. Suspects, terrorists, they saw these guys behind them. They pulled over in 2 cars, they get out, and they open fire on the cops. And the cops open fire on them. And it's not routine to have a shootout, but it's not unheard of. So the officers are responding in the way that they would normally respond, exchanging gunfire with one of the suspects. The second suspect starts to light hand grenades and throw them at them. They had 7 explosive devices in the car. 4 of them went off, 3 of them didn't. But one that went off was another pressure cooker bomb, a very large bomb. So they had a number of these small hand grenade type devices that were very similar to World War II hand grenades when they went off. And then they also had another pressure cooker bomb. One of my officers engaged in the firefight said, Commissioner, you know, when they were throwing the small bombs, we just kept shooting at them. But when they threw that big bomb, we kind of pulled our head in. It's the kind of crazy conversations you have after this incident. Police officers in the United States don't have bombs thrown at them. This has never happened before. I got a call from Danny again, another exciting call in that week where he said to me, Commissioner, we're chasing the guys, they're shooting at us and throwing bombs. I said, Danny, did you say they're throwing bombs? He said, yeah, they are. So out the door I went, got to Watertown. Now, there's some stuff going on there, right? We got to catch these guys. We locked down a 20-block perimeter around where the suspects were last seen. The man, well, I don't want to get into too much detail because I got to get to the Constitution part of this, right? You can talk for a while about this whole thing. But anyway, we decide that we're going to lock down that 20-block perimeter. And it's a fairly standard procedure. It happens in LA every day, where they do a really good job of locking down crime scenes. We don't do it as often here in Massachusetts, but we should. They lock down the perimeter of a crime scene and they start to collapse the perimeter until they catch the bad guy. And that's basically the tactic that we used. I actually spent some time in LA recently. I was up in a helicopter with the guys. I watched how they did that. And we certainly all know about perimeters all across the country, but LA's got it to a science. And so we grabbed their strategy and we used it there in Watertown. Eddie DeVoe, the police chief of Watertown, is there when I get to the scene. He's got the knowledge of the geography of the town. I've got 200 cops with more coming. So we teamed up. Troopers were there. We started to put state police, Boston police, and Watertown police at strategic locations to lock that area down. And our plan was to collapse the crime scene and catch them eventually, right? So, that's the status at about 2 o'clock in the morning. The crime scene is set. We are slowly and methodically going through. The orders that we give to the SWAT teams are very simple. Go house by house, look for suspicious indications that the suspect might be there. If you find one, enter the house. Don't go into a house where there's no indication that the suspect is inside. unless the people in the house want you to come in. So that, you know, Fourth Amendment, right? People are secure, should be secure in their homes and in their property. And those were the orders that were given, and they were followed. Now we get a little bit of a different twist, and this is where I can't get into the details. But we start to get information that the cell is larger than the two, and that it's gone active. And that there are more people in the community that are bent on terrorist attacks. And that some of that activity centers around South Station. Now that's all public. Everybody knows that we stopped the train that left South Station when it got to New Haven. And that was all based on information that we had at the time. If you watch the Washington incident that unfolded just a couple of days ago, I watched it very closely. Kathy Linney is an old friend of mine. She's a police chief in DC. She got up and she said, we think that there were 3 shooters. And we have 1 down at the scene, but we got a report of a 2nd man and a 3rd man, and we're searching for him. When she said that, I hearkened back to those hours after the bombing and the hours after the shootout with Tamil and Tsarnaev. And I thought about all the bad information that came in. Something that they call the fog of war. Everybody's calling us. In 2 days after the bombing, our bomb squad responded to 230 bombs in the city. People were terrified. The New York Police Department bomb squad, their caseload went up 5 times after our bombing. It affected everybody in the country. So you're dealing with people that are reporting things to you out of fear, out of concern, and we appreciate the reports, but there's an enormous amount of information that has to be sifted through. And when it's 2:30 in the morning and it's approaching 4:30 in the morning and you're doing these searches, you are looking at all this information and trying to determine what's right and what's wrong. So 2 things happened constitutionally. The first one affected the 5th Amendment. I got a call from the United States Attorney's Office. And they said, we are adopting this case as a terrorist case, and under the provisions of the terrorist law, I want you to notify all of your officers that if they come across this suspect and take him into custody, you are prohibited from issuing a Miranda warning. I said, who is this? This is the U.S. Attorney's Office that has a Civil Rights Division? You're telling me I can't read somebody his rights? Cannot, you are prohibited under this statute to read him his rights. I said, well, we're going to have to talk about this, Carmen, but you're the boss. You're in charge of the prosecution. I'll get that word out to my guys, but quite frankly, I'd never heard of it before. It's part of the new protection laws that were passed after 9/11. Congress has come to the opinion that this, in an ongoing case where there may be active terrorists, it's sort of one of those 24 or Homeland kind of scenarios that they put out there. The federal government was deeming it that important that they suspended Miranda. And then the other thing was the shutdown of the transit system. As you can see right here, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts entered into an agreement that the right thing to do was to shut down the whole transit system. Now that doesn't happen lightly, but because of the information that we had between 2:30 and 4:30 in the morning on April 20th, 19th, whatever, Friday morning, we were engaged in a debate as to what was prudent, what was the safest thing to do for the community. Now, let me just set that up for a second. As I told you, there's things I can't tell you about this, but I can point out who was involved in the conversation. The mayor of the city of Boston, Thomas Menino, a leading Democratic mayor. He's the guy that bans cigarettes in Boston. He doesn't let us drink Coca-Cola in our buildings anymore, right? Leading Democratic liberal mayor. Deval Patrick, the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. A man that is a leading member of the Democratic Party, a liberal governor from Massachusetts. A man that was formerly in the Civil Rights Division of the United States Attorney's Office. So these are the two key political operatives that the police structure is reporting up to. And the governor is the man that has to make the final decision with input from everybody at that table as to whether or not we shut down the transit system in the city of Boston. So our first attempt was to shut down the bus route that went right into Arsenal Mall and right past Dexter and Laurel Street for fear that the suspect could get on the bus. And then we met with Rich Davies, who is the head of transportation in Massachusetts. And he said, we can't shut down a single bus route. The governor said, why? He said, well, if we shut it down, then people are going to be left on the street, wherever we shut it down. Well, we really need to shut this down. Well, you're going to have to consider shutting down that whole area of the transit system, which would have been Watertown and the contiguous communities, including sections of Boston, Allston and Brighton. And that was the initial plan about 3:30 in the morning. But then we started to develop more information about South Station. And it became clear from our information that the prudent thing would be to shut down the whole transit system. And there was a lot of debate about it. We were sitting in a small truck with all the police officials, and we were having a conversation about what we should do. And during the course of that debate, the governor of Massachusetts decided, and he said this, he said, are you talking about from Lowell to Fall River? And they said, yes, Governor. It's an all or nothing proposition. It's 4:30, 4:30, it's getting closer to 5 o'clock. We have to get the word out before people start to leave their homes. Kurt Schwartz from the state, one of our deputy secretaries, undersecretaries of public safety, said, Governor, consider it a snow day. It happens all the time in Massachusetts. This is at least as dangerous as somebody sliding on the ice and crashing into someone. So we sent the order out. Shelter in place. This was not, by the way, enforceable by law. This was a recommendation. No one got arrested who violated this. It was simply a recommendation that the best thing that you can do is stay home until we get this situation settled. And by later on that night, the suspect was captured. We did house-to-house searches, and ultimately, at about 7 o'clock that night, not with all the power of the United States government and the police and everybody that was there, but through one citizen that had been cooped up in the house all day and his wife wouldn't let him have a cigarette. He needed a cigarette real bad, and he went out back, and he saw the suspect and called us, and that's how we caught the bad guy. The remarkable story, but the issues around the Fifth Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, all of those amendments that relate to, equal protection and search and seizure and the right to an attorney and a speedy trial, all of those things came into play. They were all dealt with, I believe, effectively, and we protected the rights of the citizens as well as the suspects in this particular thing. It's all going to be adjudicated. Everybody might have their own opinion on this, but believe me, it'll all come out eventually. Thank you very much. So instead of 40 minutes for questions, we have 8 minutes for questions. I guess I do go on. Sorry about that. Anybody have any questions?
So if you have a question, you can walk up to the mic or I can hand it to you, whatever you like. Anybody?
I think I'm loud enough.
Loud enough, okay.
You had said there were a lot of calls in. Was anything, did anything come up with that? Were there bombs found in all those calls that came in afterwards?
No, there was a very serious fire at the JFK building within minutes of the bombing, and because of actually the fire department couldn't put the fire out with normal hoses. They had to use a water cannon to knock that fire down. And we thought that it was an explosion, but what had happened was aluminum had caught on fire and created a very hot fire. It was done through smoking materials, but it took us an hour or two to figure that out. The other 200 calls were all phony calls, not phony. People thought that they were devices, but what I was trying to say was the level of concern, the level of attention goes way up, and we start to get reams of information that we have to go out and check out to make sure that it's true or not, which they call it the fog of war in a military situation. The truth of the matter is almost everything you hear after an incident like this happens is not true. But you can't discount any of it, because if you say, "I'll forget about that," and it is true, and I should say that, the decisions about people tend to look at a government action like this and say, "Oh, they're those cops or those military guys, there they go again. They're trying to push their weight around, they're trying to step on people's rights." I can tell you that when you sit at these conversations, and I've been at the table, I've reported the information that I have up to the political people that have to make these decisions, that go all the way to the President of the United States in this particular event, by the way. There is nobody at that table that's saying, "Yeah, let's go over there and push some people around." Let me tell you what the math is on this. Let me tell you what it is. It is this: we have this information. If we don't do something with the information that we have, and someone dies, it's on us. So that's the math, that's the equation. It's not about pushing people around and taking people's rights. It's about making sure that nobody else dies in a situation where too many people died already. Yes?
Yes, question for you. You talked about securing the city of Boston, but how vulnerable was the waterfront? And how do you secure the waterfront?
In Boston?
Yeah.
Our harbor units and the Coast Guard were out. And I mean, the Coast Guard loaded up with 50 calibers. They were out there. Our guys had weapons on the boats. This was a full mobilization of every police resource. So even if you weren't in Watertown, you were looking for terrorists. And believe me, that waterfront, there were 2 guys stopped over by the federal courthouse in the middle of this search. And there were significant resources over there. Yes?
I'm wondering what's going to happen for next year's marathon. What's the planning?
Yeah. So you got a little preview of it on July 4th down at the Esplanade. The state was responsible for that, but we worked very closely in planning it. They came up with some really good ideas. Some of that stuff is going to be continued into the marathon. Not all of it, because we've learned some things from that. But you can see, there'll be more surveillance, more cameras, more people, more dogs. But in the aftermath of this, one continuous question that I get is, well, what are you going to do to make sure this doesn't happen again? And everybody wants to say, we got this computer. Or this tool, we're going to drive down there and it's going to stop all of this stuff from happening. I won't buy into the, if we put enough cameras up, it'll stop it. Because these guys snuck in, they were on target for like 8 minutes, dropped their stuff, walked out, bang. That can happen anywhere, anytime. The only thing that's going to stop it is that the people that know them, that get a sense that they're doing things that are suspicious, tell us beforehand. And there were indicators in this case that in a perfect world we would have known about and we would have been able to do something about. It's the people that stop terrorism. It's not a computer or a camera. You had a question, sir?
Yes, Commissioner. I was wondering, what would be the consequence if someone was read the Miranda rights during the terrorist act?
The statute could not be employed. There couldn't be any more. Basically, there's an exemption to Miranda that allows federal agents in a special interrogation team that is based in Quantico, Virginia, that actually worked with us on this. It's the first time they've been activated since 9/11. That team could no longer, once you read them the rights, the rights attach. So they could not do any follow-up interrogation, and that's what they were hoping to do. And they actually did with ZOCA. Yes, sir.
What is it like now receiving calls from the public being vigilant? So do you guys receive a lot of calls with like backpacks being left at train stations, public libraries? Do you guys still receive a lot of those calls, or?
We do. The intensity has dropped way off in the weeks afterwards, but we get more than we did. And it's good that people are vigilant. I just came back from Ben Gurion Airport, and if you left the bag there, they'd be on you in 30 seconds. People would be saying, hey, pick your bag up. Don't walk away from that bag. That's the kind of vigilance that we need to have to protect against this. It's a very real threat. The cafe bombings in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, left a mark that exists to this day, where people are more concerned about the security than we are in the United States. But we need to be aware that it's a big bad world out there. There's a lot going on. Yes.
We have a question from someone in this area.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, you just said that that if people give you information and you negate to act on it regardless of that information, that it's on you. Is it on the Commonwealth? Is it on the police force? Is it on your conscience? What is it on?
All of the above.
All of the above. So is there's like an accountability piece, or it's like someone who polices the police?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, a lot of people police. As a matter of fact, there's more people policing the police than any other organization in the country, I'll tell you that. I mean, we're liable for civil suits, and civil suits are filed all the time against police and public officials. But we also have an internal affairs unit that investigates inappropriate behavior on part of the police. We have a separate and distinct corruption unit that looks at criminal violations that police and public officials may be committing. Our unit was involved in the Senator Diane Wilkerson prosecution in Boston. The Boston police and the FBI did their case. But they also, their main charge is to look at police. And then at the state level, the Attorney General's office reviews everything that we do. The district attorney, if there's a shooting, the district attorney has to investigate that and tell us whether or not we were acting within the color of the law. And then there's a Civil Rights Division of the United States Attorney's Office, which police is a police. I mean, their main job is to make sure that police are doing things the right way. It might not seem that way, but we're one of the most heavily regulated organizations in the country. Yes. Nice to see you again, my neighbor.
Can you speak to our criminal justice students about professional and personal skill sets that they should develop to prepare them as best anyone could be prepared for something like this?
Sure. When I came on the job in 1978, which was 35 years ago, that was a long time ago. I used to be the youngest cop in Lowell for about 5 years. I don't know where it all went. But Ray McKeon's out there, my former colleague as the police chief in Chelmsford. It's good to see you, Ray. I got to tell you, it was very legalistic when Ray and I came on the job, even when Kelly and Artie and I came on. It was all about the law and when you could arrest people and when you couldn't arrest people, when you could search people and when you couldn't search people. When I went out on the street, I was making, every time I ran into somebody, I'd think, okay, can I arrest this guy or not? And we were measured by the number of arrests that we made, so it was good to arrest people, right? We've learned that that's a stupid way to do business. It really is, and it's got us in all kinds of trouble with the community, okay? And the truth of the matter is, it's really important to do everything that we can do to prevent crime without arresting someone, all right? Every once in a while, you have to arrest somebody. So if you want to be professional in this business, work on your problem-solving skills, work on your personality skills, practice going into a room of people and talking to people. Go up to people you don't know and shake hands with them. It's a very difficult thing to learn to do. People don't do it naturally. But the better that you do that as a police officer, the better police officer you will be. It's not about locking people up anymore. It's about preventing crime through making relationships and having people trust you. The best detectives are the guys and women who can make people feel comfortable, who can get people to talk to them. Because every crime that happens, this is the way I think about it. Every crime that happens, I think, there's the bad guy that committed the crime, but there's also 10 people around that bad guy that knows that he did it. There was a billboard, there was a missing woman out in Vancouver, British Columbia. The police chief out there was a friend of mine. And he sent me a picture of a billboard, and it said, show the girl's picture. And next to it, it says, someone knows. And that's the most important thing you can know as a detective. Someone knows. So it's important to get those people that know to trust you. And that's the most important thing you can do professionally as a cop. Yes?
There's a lot of rumor about you going to Homeland Security. Can you speak to that?
No, I cannot. It's a great honor to be mentioned in the company of people that are also up for that position. There's an admiral, There's my colleague Ray Kelly in New York. There's a lot of people being mentioned for it. It's nice to be in the mix. I'm not holding my breath. So, we'll see what happens, but it's a great honor, and it would be a tremendous challenge and a fun job, actually. I know that sounds weird, because you got immigration, and you've got TSA, a lot of real controversial parts to it, but I already called Kelly and told him he could have the Secret Service if I got the job. Yes?
I have a follow-up
Yep.
question too. Often when there are crimes committed, they say, if you know anything that there's a reward of, if you can help us. Do they pay that reward?
They do, yeah, they really do. And it's anonymous too. There's a system set up where if you give us a tip and we're able to catch the person, there can be tens of thousands of dollars in the reward. And you get a number, and you're told to go to a bank and just walk up to the bank and give the bank your number, and they'll pay you the money. You don't have to even meet police officers. It works very well. It's a very sophisticated system. So call us. Anybody else? Yes.
You, as somebody National Guard who actually got activated for this,
We had 1,000, the General Rice came to me that afternoon, about an hour into it, and he said, what do you need? I said, I need personnel. I got to lock down 12 blocks across 3 streets, so really probably 36 blocks of that whole downtown area. He had 1,000 National Guard troops there by 5 o'clock that afternoon. It's unbelievable. I appreciate your service.
the only thing when we were down there, we noticed that it seemed like there was almost too many resources. There were 1 million command bands, and was there anything that you were surprised at with resource-wise, what, try to delegate people out? That seemed to be basically moving the pieces around. Was there anything that surprised you the most when you got down there and you said, I have too much stuff?
No, even when we were, the first day, that's a very good question, actually. The first day, we had that initial command post at Ring Road, and we had maybe 200 people respond to that. But very quickly, after we set up the command post at the Westin Hotel, we moved that whole operation to the Boston Common. And so thousands of police officers came into the Boston Common. Some that we asked for, some we didn't ask for. Everybody just drove down and said, what can I do? We used everybody. We really did. And there's a lot of federal money that's been spent on various things. People, the mayor may call them toys every once in a while, sort of armored cars and things like that. But you know what? We didn't know what we had. We needed everybody we could get our hands on to guard against any further damage. And it was actually a source of comfort to me that when I looked out that window and saw all those people and all those resources that we could send out. I worked in New York at the World Trade Center after the explosion. I was down there with a group of officers we took down to work with the Port Authority police. And so I was on the pile. I walked the pile. I worked with the FBI agents when they were digging the bodies out of that facility. And I worked with the New York cops who were dealing with this glut of police that came in. They gathered them all up by the United Nations, and they had a huge command post up there. So after talking to the sergeant that ran that, I knew that was going to happen to us. It's not a bad thing to have a lot of resources. It's a bad thing if you don't coordinate them. And luckily, because we were prepared for it, we were able to coordinate them. So it was a very positive thing for us.
All right, one more question, and then.
Yes, sir.
I hope to be clear with my question. I want to know if, as we know how to prevent that kind of stuff happen again, what happens is that happen again. So what are we going to do? Are we going to keep using the same system since 9/11, or we have something new that the police going to do, or all the department?
We really have to focus on prevention, and we really have to work with the community to make sure that it doesn't happen again. I suspect that it will happen again. I was in a meeting just 2 weeks ago in Washington with Kathy Lanier, who had to deal with it. It wasn't a terrorist event, but it was a similar event where even more people died than died here. So when you have the intersection of kind of worldwide terrorism, where people have a problem with us and want to bring war to our shores, coupled with easy access to firearms and the deinstitutionalization of mental health services in the nation, which has been, it's happened since the 1970s, but it's at a critical juncture now where the mentally ill are getting their hands on easily obtained guns and killing people. And so, when you see the shooting at the school in Connecticut, you have to reflect as a nation, why is this happening and what can we do to stop it? Our children are being murdered. There needs to be common sense safeguards put in place. If someone's diagnosed with a serious psychiatric illness, that person should not get a firearm. I don't care about the Second Amendment. I don't care about all these people saying everybody should have guns. If you're crazy and you're talking to people that aren't there, you shouldn't be walking around with a gun. Because our families are all potential victims on these things, and we need to do something about that as a country.
I wanted to say thank you, have everybody thank Commissioner Davis.